She hid, to watch the mating ritual, until the Alpha King caught her scent and stopped everything. The forest was darker than Lyra Voss had expected, but she had come too far to turn back now. She moved carefully between the trees, her bare feet silent on the damp earth, her heart beating fast with both fear and excitement. Tonight was the night of the sacred moon, the one night every generation when the Blackthorn Pack held their mating ritual. She had heard whispers about it her whole life, but she had never imagined she would actually see it with her own eyes. Lyra was not like other people. Her mother was human, but her father had been a wolf shifter, a member of a pack far from here. He had died before Lyra was even born, killed in a territory dispute that her mother never liked to talk about. Ever since Lyra could remember, her mother had warned her to hide her true nature. If anyone finds out what you are, her mother used to say, they will either kill you or use you. Stay hidden. Stay safe. For 18 years, Lyra had listened. She had pushed down the wildness inside her, ignored the strange pull she sometimes felt toward the moon, and lived a quiet life in a small town far from any pack territory. But lately, something had changed. The pull had grown stronger, almost impossible to resist. When she heard two travelers in the market talking about the Blackthorn Pack's ritual, something inside her had simply known she needed to see it. So here she was, deep in unfamiliar woods, hiding behind a thick cluster of bushes at the edge of a wide clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a massive bonfire, its orange flames reaching high into the night sky. Dozens of people stood around it, dressed in ceremonial clothing made of fur and leather, their faces painted with symbols Lyra didn't recognize. The air buzzed with anticipation, and then she saw him. He stood near the fire, taller than everyone else, with broad shoulders and dark hair that caught the firelight. Even from a distance, Lyra could feel his presence, a kind of quiet power that seemed to fill the entire clearing. She didn't need anyone to tell her who he was. This was Cale Draven, the Alpha King of the Blackthorn Pack. Stories about Cale had reached even Lyra's small town. He was known as a fair but firm leader, someone who had brought peace to his pack after years of conflict. He was respected by his people and feared by his enemies. Tonight, he was expected to choose his fated mate from among the unmated women of his pack, as tradition demanded. Lyra watched as a line of women began to form near the fire. Each one wore a simple white dress and a flower crown, walking forward one at a time to stand before Cale. The ritual, she realized, allowed the bond between fated mates to reveal itself naturally. If Cale's wolf recognized one of these women as his true match, the pack believed the universe itself would confirm it. The first woman stepped forward. Cale looked at her politely, but no spark seemed to pass between them. The pack let out a soft murmur of disappointment, and the woman returned to her place in line, her shoulders slumping slightly. The second woman approached. Cale's expression remained calm, unreadable. Again, nothing happened. Lyra found herself holding her breath as the ritual continued. There was something deeply moving about watching this ancient tradition unfold, something that called to the part of her she had spent her whole life suppressing. She leaned forward slightly, careful to stay hidden, and completely absorbed in what she was witnessing. She did not notice the wind shift behind her. Cale had been standing patiently through the ceremony, doing his duty as alpha, though his mind was elsewhere. He had never been fully convinced that tonight would bring him a mate. He had heard stories of alphas who waited their whole lives for the bond to form, and some who never found it at all. He was prepared, if necessary, to accept that fate might not have someone waiting for him tonight. Then, the wind changed direction. A scent reached him, faint at first, then stronger. It was unlike anything he had ever smelled before, wild and untamed, yet somehow familiar in a way that confused him. His wolf stirred inside him immediately, more alert and excited than it had been all evening. Cale's nostrils flared as he tried to place the scent, his heart suddenly beating faster. The third woman in line was speaking to him, but he barely heard her words. His eyes moved past her, scanning the edge of the clearing, searching the shadows beyond the firelight. The scent was coming from somewhere near the trees. "Forgive me," Cale said quietly, stepping back from the ritual line. The pack members around him exchanged confused glances. This had never happened before. The alpha never left the ceremony. But Cale could not stop himself. His wolf was pulling him toward the trees with a force he could not ignore. He moved past the startled crowd, his eyes locked on the darkness at the edge of the clearing, his senses fully focused on that one incredible scent. Lyra felt it before she understood what was happening. A strange tingling sensation spread across her skin, and her heart began to race for reasons she couldn't explain. She looked up from her hiding place and saw the Alpha King walking directly toward her, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. Panic shot through her. She had been so careful. How had he noticed her? She pressed herself further into the bushes, but it was too late. Kale's gaze had already found her, and there was no mistaking the way he was looking at her now, as if she were the only person in the entire clearing. "Who's there?" Kale called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance between them. Lyra knew she should run. Every instinct told her to turn and disappear into the forest before anyone else discovered what she was, but her legs refused to move. Something about his voice, about his presence, held her in place as surely as if she had been physically restrained. Kale reached the edge of the trees and stopped a few feet from where she crouched. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. He stared at her with an expression of disbelief, as though he could hardly believe what he was seeing. "Come out," he said, his voice softer now, though still carrying that note of command that seemed natural to him. "I won't hurt you." Slowly, Lyra rose from her hiding place. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped into the dim light filtering through the trees. She kept her eyes lowered at first, too afraid to meet his gaze directly, but eventually, she lifted her head and looked at him fully. The moment their eyes met, something passed between them, a feeling Lyra had never experienced before. It was as though an invisible thread connected them, pulling them closer together even as they stood still. She saw Kale's expression shift from confusion to amazement, and she realized he must be feeling it too. "You're a shifter," Kale said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. It wasn't a question. Lyra's first instinct was to deny it, to protect the secret she had kept her entire life. But something about the way he looked at her made lying feel impossible. "Half," she admitted softly. "My father was a wolf. My mother is human." Kale nodded slowly, processing this information. Behind him, Lyra could hear the murmur of voices growing louder, as the pack members realized their alpha had not returned to the ceremony. Several of them were beginning to approach, curious and concerned about what had drawn him away. "What's your name?" Kale asked, ignoring the commotion behind him. "Lyra," she said. "Lyra Voss." Kale repeated her name softly, as though testing how it felt on his tongue. Then he did something that surprised her completely. He smiled, a genuine smile that softened the strong lines of his face and made him look younger, more approachable. "Lyra," he said again, "I think you might be the reason I left my own ceremony." Before Lyra could respond, several pack members reached them, their expressions ranging from curiosity to clear suspicion. A tall woman with sharp eyes stepped forward first, looking Lyra up and down with obvious disapproval. "Alpha, who is this?" the woman asked, her tone sharp. "She isn't part of our pack. She shouldn't even be here." Kale straightened, his demeanor shifting back into that of a leader addressing his people. "This is Lyra," he said simply, "and it seems the bond has chosen her." A wave of shocked murmurs spread through the small crowd that had gathered. The sharp-eyed woman's mouth fell open slightly. "That's impossible," she said. "She wasn't even part of the ritual. She wasn't presented before you." "The bond doesn't follow our rules," Kale replied calmly. "It follows its own. I felt it the moment the wind carried her scent to me. There's no mistaking it." Lyra stood frozen, overwhelmed by everything happening around her. She had only come to watch the ritual from a safe distance, never imagining she would become part of it herself. Now she was standing in the middle of an unfamiliar pack, being discussed as though she were the center of some great destiny she had never asked for. "This isn't right," another voice called out. A younger man stepped forward, his eyes narrowed with frustration. "She's a stranger. We don't know anything about her. How can we trust that this bond is even real?" Kale's expression hardened slightly, though his voice remained controlled. "I would not lie about something as sacred as the mate bond, Tobin. You know this." The tension in the clearing was thick, and Lyra felt increasingly uncomfortable under the weight of so many unfamiliar eyes. She glanced at Kale, unsure of what to do or say, feeling completely out of her depth in this world she had only ever observed from a distance. Sensing her discomfort, Kale turned to face her directly, his expression softening once again. "I know this is overwhelming," he said quietly. His words meant only for her. "I won't force you into anything you don't want, but I would like the chance to know you, if you'll allow it." Lyra studied his face, searching for any sign of deception, but found none. There was something honest in his eyes, something that made her feel, despite the chaos around them, that she could trust him. The pull she felt toward him was undeniable, a sensation deeper than mere attraction, something that felt woven into the very fabric of who she was. "I came here because I wanted to see what my father's world was like," she said slowly. "I never expected this." "Neither did I," Kale admitted, a small smile returning to his lips. "But I'm not sorry it happened." The sharp-eyed woman who had spoken first crossed her arms, clearly still unconvinced, but she said nothing further. The younger man, Tobin, looked between Kale and Lyra with obvious frustration, but he too remained silent, recognizing that arguing further would accomplish nothing against the Alpha's declaration. Kale turned back to address his pack, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Tonight's ritual has given us an answer none of us expected," he said, "but the bond is the bond. I will not turn away from it simply because it does not fit neatly into our traditions. Lyra will be welcomed among us, and I ask that you treat her with the respect she deserves." Though some members of the pack still looked uncertain, most began to nod, understanding and accepting their Alpha's words, even if they did not fully understand the situation. The ritual fire continued to burn in the distance, its light flickering against the trees as the crowd slowly began to disperse, murmuring quietly among themselves about the strange turn the evening had taken. Kale extended his hand toward Lyra. "Will you come with me?" he asked. "I would like to show you my home, if you're willing." Lyra looked at his outstretched hand, then back up at his face. Everything about this night had been unexpected, frightening, and confusing, yet beneath all of that, she felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Hope. For the first time in her life, she didn't have to hide what she was. Someone had seen the truth of her and, instead of fear or rejection, had offered acceptance. Slowly, she reached out and placed her hand in his. His fingers wrapped gently around hers, warm and steady, and the strange pull she had felt since the moment their eyes met seemed to settle into something calmer, something that felt almost like coming home. "Yes," she said softly, "I'll come with you." Together, they walked away from the dying firelight and into the heart of the Blackthorn territory, leaving behind the life of hiding and uncertainty that Lyra had known for so long. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever questions still needed answers, she knew one thing for certain: the destiny she had never imagined for herself had finally found her, and she was ready to face it.